On today's Star Wars Factions Compared episode, we'll be examining the Special Forces units of the four main prequel and original trilogy factions. Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another episode of Factions Compared. To see previous episodes in this series to get an idea of what we're doing here, make sure to check the link down in the description. Specifically though, today we are talking about the Special Forces arms of the Galactic Republic, the Rebel Alliance, the Galactic Empire, and the Confederacy of Independent Systems. First we'll take a look at each faction and then at the end we'll rank them from best to worst. But I'm curious, before watching the video, which one of these factions do you think has the best Special Forces units? Take a second and vote in the upper right hand corner right now. Let's get started with a look at the Galactic Empire. And I'm not going to lie, besides for last episode, the Empire has had sort of a rough go during this series. They received poor ratings in both the Army and Navy centered episodes. But I think things will change today. Special Forces is one area where I think the Empire actually has a really good chance of coming out ahead. First off, the Empire's army was born of the Old Republic, which itself had specialized clone trooper training. Not only were pre-existing regiments like the clone Commandos incorporated into the Imperial regime, but the Republic's general favoring of Special Forces was not only maintained, but also expanded. Because of the size of the Star Wars galaxy, the variety of unique threats, and the degree to which the Empire militarized, the Imperial Special Forces divisions continued to be developed. Besides for just specialized training, the Empire also made numerous advancements in genetic manipulation, power armor, force manipulation, and various other areas related to combat effectiveness. Special units like Dark Troopers or Terror Troopers were crafted with a purpose and technology never seen before in the galaxy, all reflecting the Empire's extreme militarization and Palpatine's recognition of the incredible threats facing the galaxy. However, the Empire not only had excellent soldiers with the best experimental technology, but also a variety of soldiers. The Dark Trooper branch alone had over a dozen different subtypes. This meant that the Empire was able to effectively bring a great deal of force tailor-designed to any threat. Palpatine was crazy and evil, and thus the Empire was as well. This results in hundreds if not thousands of special projects, many which spawned a variety of Special Forces units. Due to that, along with, as I mentioned, the sheer militarization of the Empire, I think it's really tough to beat them in the Special Forces category. The Imperial Army grew out of the Republic, so let's also take a look now at that faction specifically. Because the Republic existed for thousands of years, we will focus on the Clone Wars era, and specifically on clone Special Forces. Most of the Special Forces clone troopers, including ARC troopers and clone Commandos, fell under the Special Operations Brigade. ARCs and Commandos were actually the most well-known, in my opinion, of the SF units and were representative of the Clone Army's Special Forces generally. The regular clone trooper was trained from birth to be a fighting and killing machine. Clone Special Forces units received not only more training with a great deal more resources dedicated to them, but also better training. Commandos and ARC troopers had better teachers, they had more one-on-one time with their instructors, and they were taught how to succeed and survive dangerous missions. Both, but ARC troopers specifically, were also genetically modified to be more strong-willed and independent. And independent means not only that they could operate on their own or within small groups, but that each trooper had a distinct personality, something that you don't see to the same degree among ordinary clones. While all Special Forces clones were given fantastic armor and weaponry, I really do think it's this training that is key. The ordinary clone was already well trained, however Special Forces units, ARCs, and Commandos were on a whole nother level. Their whole life dedicated to not only being a better soldier, but also a better Special Forces soldier. We also see with clone Commandos that they're integrated into squads at a very, very early age, which allows them to operate as a unit in a way that most clones, and certainly most ordinary troopers, could not. There's really something to be said about being bred to kill. Now, there were other units that I could talk about, including Shadow Troopers, but I think what I've said so far about ARCs and Clone Commandos generally holds true for all Clone Special Forces divisions. Next, we have the other belligerents of the Clone War, the Confederacy of Independent Systems. CIS Special Forces were obviously unique, as they were droids. They were built rather than birthed and trained. I see two main benefits to using droid special forces. The first is that, at least theoretically, you can design a model to fit any situation. You can also design and produce droids relatively quickly, which ties into the second benefit. If a Special Forces droid is destroyed, well, you just build another one. You don't lose years of training and institutional knowledge. You just go to the factory and pop another one out. You don't have to train it for 7, 10, 15 years. This, however, is also the clear downside to droid Special Forces. I think that generally, battle droids are less deadly than organics, at least behaviorally. That lack of personality, institutional knowledge, and just experience that you get from years of battles and being a Special Forces commando cannot be replicated by programming. Sure, droids have quick reflexes, but they lack a certain instinct, at least in the Star Wars universe, that you see with organic combatants. The technological advantage should not be ignored, and even the Empire used some form of droids with their Shadow Trooper programming. However, even organic Special Forces units can neutralize that advantage by using things like vehicles or explosives. All in all, I don't think Confederate programming will ever be equal to training and experience. And as I stated a second ago, I think that any technological advantage, any durability, any firepower, any whatever, can be neutralized or equalized through the use of armor or vehicles. This is really not surprising, given the droid army more often than not relied on sheer numbers rather than individual killing machines. I will certainly acknowledge, though, that the Confederacy of Independent Systems created a variety of very dangerous droid types. The Super Battle Droids, the Ultra Battle Droids, Cortosis Droids, Droidicas, and more all gave Republic soldiers a lot of trouble. Finally, we have Rebel Alliance Special Forces, and I think the defining aspect of the Alliance in this respect is a lack of institutional training infrastructure. Now, the Alliance certainly did have Special Forces units, 2 in particular which I'll talk about later, but there is no denying that when compared with the Empire, the Alliance didn't have the time or the resources to overly train its soldiers. Many of the Alliance's best soldiers were primarily trained and defected from the Empire or from other military groups. Obviously, the Alliance did do some of its own training, however, there was somewhat of a lack of uniformity, in my opinion. The Alliance had both Spec Ops and Special Forces divisions. The Spec Op forces were kind of like spies, going undercover, performing missions of subterfuge, etc., etc. Special Forces, on the other hand, were more like Imperial Commandos or ARC Troopers. There's not really a lot to say, other than that these soldiers were the best of the best and underwent an additional level of training when compared with other Alliance soldiers. Still, the Alliance was limited. They had a lack of resources, a lack of personnel, lack of equipment, and they weren't exactly pioneering new forms of technology. The Alliance was much smaller than the other factions on this list. However, the Empire did piss off a lot of people, and they didn't generally use aliens within their ranks. That gave the Alliance 2 potential avenues for recruitment. There's also no denying that the Alliance did win the war. Much of this was because of the efforts of Special Forces groups on covert missions. With a brief description of the 4 factions out of the way, let's now rank them from best Special Forces to worst. The faction with the best Special Forces is, in my opinion, the Galactic Empire. They had the most type of troops, their troops were the best, and they had the best weapons. They also undertook the most research and were constantly developing new technologies and Special Forces units. I don't think any faction in Star Wars history can match the Empire when it comes to scale and quality of their Special Forces. Coming in at number 2 is the Clone Wars era Republic. I think the excellent training of clone units and the fact that they were birthed and bred to be successful fighters is what sets them apart from the lower factions on this list. Coming in at number 3 is the Rebel Alliance, and there's just the fact that the Alliance didn't have as much infrastructure and resources as the other factions on this list. However, I will say that they did use their Special Forces units very, very well, which more or less allowed them to win the Galactic Civil War. Still, I think the training of their units can't compare to that of the Republic, and they certainly didn't have the fancy high-tech technology or things like genetic manipulation that the Empire had. Still, they do manage to come ahead of the worst faction on this list, the Confederacy of Independent Systems. The Confederacy lands in this position purely because it is my opinion that droids in combat will never be as effective as an organic being, especially a being who has been hardened by years of battle and training. In my opinion, the CIS also placed less importance on Special Forces divisions, relying more commonly on sheer numbers, employing large amounts of basic battle droid models. We do see Commando droids and other models, but those were relatively rare and still not as good as the Special Forces units of the other factions. As I mentioned, I think any of the technological advantages held by droids, for example increased armor, can be dealt with by organics using powerful weapons or vehicles. That, however, is just my opinion. Am I underestimating the droid army, overvaluing the Empire, or have I failed to realize that the Rebel Special Forces were good enough to win the Galactic Civil War? Let me know all of that and more down in the comments. Also, let me know whether you liked this video, what you'd like to see next, any ideas you have for future Versus episodes or Factions Compared videos, and don't forget, if you haven't already, to follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, and if you want to support the channel, consider checking out my Patreon. Anyway, as always guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been EckhartsLadder. May the Force be with you.